From the rain-slicked streets of Salford to the sun-drenched coasts of Spain, our story today follows a man whose life has been a relentless pursuit of ill-gotten gains, Lee Tanzi. A name synonymous with armed robbery, a figure who has spent years both behind bars and on the run. Lee Tanzi isn't just a petty criminal, he's a career armed robber, known for his involvement in some of the most audacious bank and jewelry store heists in northern England. His criminal career stretches back years, marked by violence, meticulous planning, and a chilling disregard for the safety of others. Let's rewind to 2008 and 2009. Tanzi was a key player in a gang that terrorized banks across West Yorkshire and Lancashire. Imagine the scene: a quiet Lloyd's TSB in Darwin, then an HSBC in Huddersfield, suddenly shattered by the sound of smashing glass and the sight of masked figures wielding machetes and sledgehammers. These weren't smash-and-grab amateurs. They were organized, ruthless. In one particularly telling moment, during the Darwin raid, Tanzi injured his arm on broken glass. His immediate reaction? Not pain, but a calculated attempt to wipe away his blood, to erase any trace of his DNA. That's the level of cunning we're talking about. The law, however, was closing in. After a high-speed chase, Tanzi and his accomplice Rickton Henry managed to slip away, fleeing to the assumed safety of Spain. But their freedom was short-lived. They were apprehended at Malaga Airport and extradited back to face justice. In 2011, Lee Tanzi was handed an 11-year prison sentence for his role in these chilling robberies. You might think that would be the end of it, a decade behind bars, time to reflect, to change. But for Lee Tanzi, it was merely a pause. Incredibly, Tanzi was released early from his sentence. And what did he do with this second chance? He squandered it. By 2016, he was back to his old ways, joining forces with new accomplices, Anthony Goff and Christopher Rubin, for another terrifying crime spree. Between July 2016 and January 2017, this trio embarked on 6 more armed robberies, hitting banks and jewelers across the north of England. Their methods had evolved. They were now masters of disguise, often posing as builders in high-visibility jackets, blending into the background before and after their raids. They used cloned registration plates, constantly switched getaway vehicles, and even set cars on fire to destroy evidence and throw police off their scent. Can you imagine the terror? Picture a jeweler's in Rawtenstall, 2 women going about their day, suddenly facing the barrel of a handgun and a sawn-off shotgun. The gang made off with over £200,000 in jewelry in that single brutal raid. These weren't just thefts, they were traumatic experiences that left lasting scars on their victims. The police, however, were relentless. They described Tanzi and his crew as being fueled by greed and becoming arrogant in the fact they were never going to be caught. But every criminal has a slip-up, and theirs came in January 2017. They were caught red-handed, preparing for yet another robbery in New Mills, Derbyshire in March. 2018, the curtain fell on Lee Tanzi's reign of terror. At 40 years old, alongside Goff and Rubin, he faced the music, admitting to the conspiracy, to the firearms that had terrorized so many. And the verdict? A staggering 21 years in prison for each of them. Lee Tanzi's story is a chilling echo, a stark warning of a life utterly consumed by crime. A man who, given chance after chance, chose only to plunge deeper into the darkness. His legacy isn't one of daring heists, but of shattered lives, endless fear, and the cold, unyielding reality of a prison cell.
Hello, and welcome to our investigation into the downfall of 2 of the UK's most ruthless drug kingpins. The Tobin brothers, Alan and John, built a sophisticated and highly profitable drug empire that stretched across the country. But as is often the case in the criminal underworld, their greed and paranoia led to a brutal and bloody end. This is a story of a massive drug bust, a mysterious accountant known as the Banker, a disgraced former UFC star, and a series of revenge plots that tore their empire apart. From 2016 to 2020, the Tobin brothers, using the encrypted EncroChat phones, supplied huge amounts of cocaine, heroin, and other drugs to notorious gangs across the UK. Alan, the older brother, lived a double life. By day, he was a respected mental health nurse, but by night, he was a drug lord. His younger brother, John, was his partner in crime. To handle their dirty work, they enlisted former UFC fighter Robbie the Bear Broughton as their enforcer, a man whose 18-stone frame ensured debts were paid one way or another. They were making millions, living lavish lifestyles, and they thought they were untouchable. But their downfall began with a single moment on the M6 motorway. In August 2018, police intercepted a van carrying a staggering £20 million worth of cocaine, the largest onshore seizure in UK history. The driver, Jamie Simpson, was a courier working for the Tobins. The loss of that consignment was a fatal blow. It sent them spiraling into massive debt and sparked a desperate series of events. John Tobin, in particular, owed a significant sum to a mysterious underworld accountant, a woman known only as the banker. When he couldn't pay, the intimidation began, and on February 6, 2020, it escalated into violence. John Tobin was shot on his own doorstep. With their backs against the wall, the brothers became more reckless and violent. EncroChat messages, later hacked by police, revealed their true desperation. They had fallen from being multimillionaire drug dealers to men struggling to pay their bills. In a twisted plot for revenge, they sought to settle a dispute with a rival gang in Warrington. They conspired with an alleged Manchester gangland boss to have two men, a father and son, shot on their doorsteps. The hitman, a serving soldier named Aaron Bretherton, was disguised as a pizza delivery driver, but he shot the wrong man, an innocent man named David Barnes, who was left with shattered bones and a ruined life. As the violence escalated, the Tobins' web of deceit unraveled. The messages on their EncroChat phones provided police with a detailed roadmap of their entire criminal enterprise. They showed the brothers orchestrating drug deals, threatening rivals, and even plotting to have a man named Alvin, whom Alan claimed owed him £1.5 million, carved up in prison. That man turned out to be Jamie Oldroyd, the former customer of the Tobins. The same Oldroyd who was targeted by a terrifying campaign of violence and was issued an official warning by police that he was in danger of being murdered. The game was over. The violence and desperation had caught up with them. The Tobin brothers, who had once dreamed of making millions, are now behind bars. Alan was sentenced to 28 years and John to 22 years. Their enforcer, Robbie Broughton, was jailed for 16 years. Their story serves as a stark warning of the reality behind the glamorous facade of the criminal underworld. A world where betrayal, violence, and vengeance are just part of the price of doing business. A world where everyone, from the kingpins to the enforcers, eventually pays the price. Today we delve into the story of Jamie Rothwell, a man whose criminal activities and eventual downfall highlight the determined efforts of law enforcement against organized crime. The story begins in Salford, Greater Manchester, where a dangerous feud ignited between two rival gangs, known as the A-Team and the Anti-A-Team. This gangland war, which began in 2015, escalated into a series of shocking and violent incidents, including at least 7 shootings involving handguns, shotguns, and even an Uzi submachine gun. At the center of this violence was Jamie Rothwell, identified as a leading figure in the Anti-A-Team gang. Rothwell himself was a victim of this conflict, having been shot in what was believed to be a revenge attack, but his alleged involvement in the violence was far more sinister. He was charged with conspiring to murder 2 men and conspiring to cause grievous bodily harm. However, after a 6-week trial, the jury found him not guilty of these specific charges. Despite this acquittal, Rothwell's criminal career was far from over. His true criminal network was exposed by an unprecedented international police operation. The operation, known as Operation Venetic in the UK, targeted a highly encrypted communications platform called EncroChat, which criminals across Europe believed was untraceable. When EncroChat was compromised in April 2020, Rothwell's world came crashing down. The police were able to monitor his encrypted communications in real time for 74 days, revealing the inner workings of his sprawling criminal enterprise. With his communications now an open book to law enforcement, Rothwell fled the UK and settled in Spain. But even from abroad, he continued to orchestrate the importation and distribution of drugs, firearms, and cash. His messages were a chilling insight into a life of crime, exposing his command over the network and his involvement in the trafficking of high-powered weapons, including AK-47 rifles. The messages weren't just about business, they also showed him discussing potential acts of extreme violence. His time as a fugitive was short-lived. In May 2020, a joint operation between Greater Manchester Police and the National Crime Agency, working with Spanish authorities, led to his arrest in Barcelona. He was extradited back to the UK to face justice. Jamie Rothwell's conviction stands as a testament to the success of Operation Venetic and the collaborative efforts of international law enforcement. The evidence gathered from the EncroChat messages exposed his crimes, and he was ultimately sentenced to 43 years in prison. The case was a landmark moment, showcasing how modern policing and international cooperation are changing the fight against organized crime. To understand David Hunt, we must first understand his roots. Born into a large family in the East End of London, the Hunts were, for generations, a family deeply embedded in the tough, working-class fabric of areas like Canning Town and Plaistow. In environments like these, where opportunities could be scarce and law enforcement was often seen with suspicion, a certain code of conduct often prevailed. The Hunt family, including David and his brothers, were known figures in these communities from an early age. While their activities were largely confined to local notoriety in their younger years, it was during the 1970s and 80s that David Hunt's reputation began to solidify. He was often described as a man of imposing physical presence, earning him the nickname Longfella, but also of sharp intellect and a formidable ability to navigate the dangerous currents of the criminal underworld. This period saw the foundations laid for what would become a formidable and feared presence in London's organized crime landscape. As the decades turned, David Hunt's name became increasingly prominent, associated with a wide array of alleged criminal activities. While he consistently maintained that he was a legitimate businessman involved in property and other ventures, various police investigations and media reports painted a very different picture. He was linked to drug trafficking on a significant scale, large-scale protection rackets, armed robbery, and extensive money laundering operations. What distinguished Hunt, according to those who investigated him, was not just the scale of his alleged operations, but his purported ability to operate with a degree of impunity, often seeming to remain just outside the reach of formal convictions. He was said to have built a vast network, extending influence into legitimate businesses and maintaining control through a combination of fear and loyalty. His homes, particularly the fortified properties he owned, became symbols of his alleged wealth and influence, often featuring in news reports and documentaries. The narrative that emerged was of a highly intelligent individual who understood the intricacies of law and how to exploit its loopholes. Employing sophisticated methods to manage his alleged criminal enterprises, despite the pervasive allegations and consistent police attention, David Hunt has a remarkable record of avoiding major criminal convictions for serious offenses. This led to a public perception, and indeed a media narrative, that he was untouchable. He faced numerous police investigations, civil proceedings, and high-profile court cases, yet often emerged without a definitive conviction on the most serious charges. One of the most notable legal battles came in 2013, when he sued a national newspaper for libel over articles that explicitly described him as a gangland boss. During this high-stakes civil trial, an unprecedented amount of evidence from police and intelligence agencies was presented in open court, detailing alleged murders, drug dealing, and other violent crimes linked to Hunt and his associates. While he ultimately lost the libel case, a devastating blow to his public image, the criminal convictions that many expected following such revelations never materialized. This outcome further fueled the mystique surrounding him, reinforcing the idea that he operated with a level of cunning and protection that defied conventional law enforcement. His legal team consistently argued that he was a victim of a decades-long police vendetta, based on circumstantial evidence and unproven allegations. Beyond the courtrooms and headlines, David Hunt cultivated a formidable persona. He was known for his carefully managed public appearances, often seen as charismatic by those who met him, but also undeniably intimidating. He was a man who understood power, not just through brute force, but through reputation, connections, and an intricate understanding of social dynamics. His alleged influence wasn't confined to the criminal underworld. It was said to touch upon local politics, business dealings, and even aspects of community life in certain areas. He often presented himself as a family man, a pillar of his community, a stark contrast to the shadowy figure described by law enforcement. This duality, this ability to project different images, is a key part of his enduring enigma. He became, for many, a symbol of the enduring shadowy power of organized crime in modern Britain, a reminder that even in an age of increased surveillance and sophisticated policing, certain figures can maintain their influence and operate seemingly outside the conventional bounds of the law. David Hunt, Longfella, remains a figure of immense controversy and speculation. Whether seen as a master criminal who evaded justice or a businessman unfairly targeted by the authorities, his story is undeniably woven into the fabric of London's recent criminal history. He represents the persistent challenge of organized crime, the gray areas between legality and illegality, and the complex figures who operate within them. His name continues to evoke strong reactions, a testament to the enduring impact of his alleged life and times in the British underworld.
Oh, I wonder why I'm still sat in my cell here, going through the same shit year after year. Gotta keep up, keep strong, don't shed a tear. Show them a soldier, don't show the fear. Yeah, they abolished it, it took them how long? Took them 12 fucking years to admit that they're wrong. Now thousands of people imprisoned, lives with no hope, struggling it, finding it hard to cope. Just a step from the rope round the throat and the choke. Tears soak up to the suicide note. These people in Parliament picking lives apart while they pocket the profits and then they hide in the dark.
Now, when you hear prison escape, you might think of dramatic Hollywood movies. But Joe Outlaw's rooftop protests from high-security prisons like Franklin and Strangeways weren't about freedom in the traditional sense. They were a desperate, very public plea for justice, not just for himself, but for nearly 3,000 other people stuck in a legal limbo that even the Justice Secretary calls a stain on the system. So, what exactly are IPP sentences? Imagine being sent to prison for a crime, serving your minimum tariff, essentially the punishment part of your sentence, and then just staying there, indefinitely. No release date, no clear path out, just waiting for a parole board to decide you're no longer a risk. Sounds harsh, right? Well, that's exactly what IPP, or Imprisonment for Public Protection, was. Introduced in 2005, IPP sentences were designed for serious offenders whose crimes didn't warrant a life sentence, but who were deemed a significant risk to the public. The idea was to hold them until they were no longer a danger. But in practice, it became a nightmare. People ended up serving years, sometimes decades, beyond their original tariff, often for relatively minor offenses. The system was quickly criticized as unclear and inconsistent. And in 2012, after just 7 years, IPP sentences were abolished. You heard that right, abolished. But here's the kicker. Abolition didn't mean everyone on an IPP sentence was automatically released. Far from it. As of September last year, there were still over 2,900 people like Joe Outlaw languishing in prison on these very same sentences. Over 1,200 of them have never even been released, while others have been recalled to custody. This brings us back to Joe Outlaw. Born Chris Hordosi, he changed his name to Outlaw while inside. In 2011, he was given an IPP sentence for robbing a takeaway with an imitation firearm while high on drugs. His tariff was 9 years. By now, he's served 12. 12 years later, he's still in prison, fighting a system he believes is rigged against release. Joe's protests are legendary. On the summer solstice in 2023, the hottest day of the year, he broke through a caged exercise yard at HMP Franklin, known as Monster Mansion due to its dangerous inmates, and got onto the roof. A local photographer captured him sunbathing in his underpants, negotiating with riot police. This wasn't his first time. Just months before, in April, he'd spent 12 hours on the roof of HMP Manchester, or Strangeways, in the pouring rain, writing "Free IPZ" in gloss paint. He's an expert climber, honed from escaping care homes as a youth. But these weren't joyrides. They were desperate acts born from despair. Joe claims he was facing horrid levels of abuse and neglect at Franklin, and that the alternative to protesting was suicide. He alleges he's seen 270 other IPP prisoners die in jail, 81 by suicide, and even some committing murder, believing they're in for life anyway. Joe himself has attempted suicide. Think about that. The mental toll of having no release date, no certainty, no hope is immense. Joe describes a system where goalposts moved again, with new courses being created every time prisoners completed existing ones, making release an ever-moving target. The parole board, he argues, is inherently risk-averse, treating those in for fights or robbery like they are murderers. After his Franklin protest, Joe was moved to HMP Belmarsh, a Category A jail. He claims he's been in total isolation on a special unit opened just for him for nearly 6 months, seeing no other inmates. He believes this is to silence his activism. The independent monitoring board at Belmarsh even called his situation and that of other IPP prisoners inhumane. The calls for reform are growing. Even the current Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, has called IPP sentences a stain on the justice system. Last month, Chalk announced reforms to cut the license period for released IPP prisoners from 10 to 3 years. But for those still inside, like Joe, it's unclear if this offers a real pathway to freedom. Joe knows some people will look at his actions and think he's bringing it on himself, but he challenges us to put ourselves in his shoes. What would you do, he asks, when the people who are meant to be helping you are the ones who are abusing you, when no one around you cares or treats you with respect? He paints a picture of corruption, with drones delivering drugs to prisons and officers turning a blind eye to rampant smartphone use, which ironically allowed him to build a following with his protest raps. The prison service maintains that those still in custody were deemed a high risk by a judge, and that the independent parole board must decide if they are safe to leave. They point to the reduction in IPP prisoners by 3/4 and improved access to rehabilitation. But for the nearly 3,000 still inside, especially those like Joe Outlaw who have served far beyond their original tariffs, the fight for justice continues. Joe Outlaw's story is a stark reminder that our justice system, even with the best intentions, can have devastating human consequences. It raises critical questions about punishment, rehabilitation, and the very definition of justice. What do you think about IPP sentences and Joe Outlaw's protests? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video informative, please give it a like and subscribe for more deep dives into complex stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hello, and welcome. Today, we're taking a deep dive into one of London's most sophisticated and audacious burglary rings. A group of 4 men, part of an organized criminal network, have been sentenced after a spree of high-value burglaries that left a trail of destruction across London and Hertfordshire. Their thefts and the damage they caused amounted to an estimated £2 million. The press release from the Metropolitan Police's flying squad paints a shocking picture of their operations. These weren't petty thieves. They were organized, and they were fast. They would cut through metal shutters, smash windows, and raid counters in full view of the public, grabbing high-value stock before escaping at speed. This wasn't a one-off operation. The group's criminal activities spanned 2 distinct periods. The first began in January 2020 and lasted until September 2022. During this time, Lewis Northover, Scott Logan, and Sean Bennett were the key players. They used high-powered stolen vehicles to target a range of commercial properties, focusing on items like cigarettes, jewelry, and silverware. Their method was precise. They'd drive the stolen cars to shops in North London and the surrounding home counties. Once there, they would use tools to cut through the metal shutters and force their way inside. The operations were so swift, with each member having a clearly defined role, that they were in and out in minutes. This first crime wave linked them to in the region of 100 burglaries, with the stolen property and damage exceeding a staggering £1 million. After a brief hiatus, the network resumed their criminal enterprise in April 2024. This time, Northover and Logan were joined by a new member, Saction Morgan. For 9 months, they targeted more than 35 convenience stores, electronics shops, and even a department store, with several raids on jewelry stores in South London. The stolen goods were often stored in isolated locations, including, astonishingly, the grounds of a church. This second series of burglaries showed the group's continued boldness and their belief that they were untouchable, but they were wrong. The Metropolitan Police's Flying Squad, a unit dedicated to tackling organized crime, was on their trail. The investigation was a masterclass in diligent police work. Detectives had to sift through hundreds of hours of CCTV footage, conduct forensic searches, and place the suspects under careful surveillance. They tracked the group's movements, including 2 of their stolen getaway vehicles, an Audi RS6 and a VW T-Roc, to a secluded barn near Waltham Abbey. This barn was being used as a storage location for their stolen goods. The end came on Thursday, January 9th. After Northover, Logan, and Morgan targeted an electronics store in northwest London, they returned to their storage location at the barn. But instead of an empty building, they found flying squad officers lying in wait. Logan and Morgan were caught red-handed, in possession of the stolen goods, an angle grinder used in the burglaries, and even high-powered electric bikes. Northover was arrested in the following weeks. The arrests led to further discoveries. When officers apprehended Sean Bennett, they found a trove of stolen silver, worth £80,000, at his home. Bennett claimed he had simply been paid to store the items, but it was another piece of the puzzle that linked him to the network. With the evidence stacked against them, the 4 men entered guilty pleas. Lewis Northover and Scott Logan were each sentenced to 6 years and 9 months in prison. Sean Bennett received 4 years and 10 months, and Sasha Morgan was sentenced to 2 years and 7 months. Detective Chief Inspector Scott Mather, who led the investigation, said the men horrified shopkeepers and communities with a series of raids. He added that the force's hard work shows their commitment to taking the fight to criminal gangs. This case serves as a powerful reminder of the sophisticated nature of organized crime, but also of the dedication of the police in bringing these criminals to justice. The Met has reported a 16% reduction in business robberies in London over the last 4 weeks, a testament to their ongoing efforts. Thank you for watching. For more stories like this, please subscribe. It was a shocking act of violence that reverberated across London. A gunman on a powerful motorbike firing 6 shots in 2 seconds outside a busy restaurant in Dalston. The intended targets were a group of men eating at an outdoor table, but the first bullet shattered the glass and hit a 9-year-old girl in the head. She was just eating ice cream. Police described her survival as a miracle. She spent over 3 months in the hospital, and her skull had to be rebuilt with titanium. The bullet is still lodged in her brain, and she faces a lifetime of physical and cognitive challenges. This horrific event wasn't a random attack. It was a carefully planned assassination attempt, and it was just one more chapter in a brutal, decades-long gang war. Police believe the feud between the 2 rival gangs, the Tottenham Turks and the Hackney Turks, is behind more than 20 murders over the past 2 decades. At the heart of the conflict are 2 men, Kemal Armagan of the Hackney Turks and Izzet Eren of the Tottenham Turks. The war between them and their associates has seen members of the public, their families, and even their own gang members murdered and maimed on the streets of London and across Europe. The spark that ignited this fire came in the early hours of January 24, 2009. A fight broke out at a snooker hall in North London. Kemal Armagan, a leading figure in the Hackney Turks, was beaten up. He told police at the time, "I'm old school. I'll sort it out myself," and he did. What followed was a swift and bloody escalation. That year alone, the feud was directly linked to 31 shootings, 4 arsons, 5 stabbings, and 3 murders. The violence became a vicious cycle of retaliation. The Hackney Turks' E5 Social Club was sprayed with machine gun fire in March 2009. Later that year, Izzet Eren of the Tottenham Turks was shot at 12 times but escaped uninjured. Weeks later, fellow Tottenham Turk Oktay Erbasli was shot dead by a man on a motorbike. Just 3 days after that, a gunman opened fire with a submachine gun at the E5 Social Club, killing 21-year-old Cem Düzgün, who was not believed to be the intended target. Prosecutors said it was a hit ordered by Kemal Eren as revenge for the shooting of Erbasli. the war continued to rage with lethal consequences. In February 2012, Ali Armagan, Kamal's brother, was shot dead in his car. His death led to a further hit in Turkey in December that same year, where Kamal Eren was shot and left paralyzed. Then in April 2013, the war claimed a new leader. Zafer Eren, then head of the Tottenham Turks, was shot dead in Southgate. His younger brother, Izzet Eren, stepped up to lead the gang, ensuring the cycle of violence would continue. Izzet Eren was a major player, but he was also a man who had a knack for escaping. In 2014, he was wanted for a revenge shooting in Turkey, but he escaped from prison and made his way back to the UK. Police stopped him in October 2015 on a stolen motorbike, armed with a pistol and a Scorpion submachine gun. They believed he was on his way to avenge his brother Zafer's murder. While being taken to court for firearms offenses, Izzet Eren's gang attempted a daring prison van escape. The Metropolitan Police had intelligence of the plot, and during the operation, a police marksman fatally shot Jermaine Baker, one of the men recruited to help with the escape. Izzet Eren was jailed for 14 years and transferred to a Turkish prison, but he escaped again just a month later. His younger brother, Hussein, was murdered on a holiday to Turkey in 2020, sparking yet another wave of violence. That year alone, police intelligence linked the Tottenham Turks to 3 fatal shootings and 4 threat-to-life warnings. The gang was even linked by a judge to the murder of DJ Kray Alpergin, who was kidnapped, tortured, and killed in October 2022. The war came full circle last year in Moldova, where Izzet Eren, who had been granted bail on an asylum claim, was shot and killed as he sat outside a cafe. The suspect? Kamal Armagan, wearing a camouflage outfit. He allegedly fired 7 shots into Eren's back and head, killing him instantly in what was a clear act of revenge. Police in Turkey confirmed that Kamal Armagan was arrested just a few months ago, on March 10th of this year. Now, with both leaders killed or arrested, you might think the war is over. But experts say the bloodshed is far from finished. Tony Saggers, former head of drugs threat and intelligence for the National Crime Agency, says Turkish organized crime groups have filled the demand for heroin in the UK since the 1970s. These gangs mirror legitimate trade routes, bringing drugs from Afghanistan through Iran and into Europe. The Hackney Turks, or the Bombasalers, were once led by a man known as the Emperor, who was said to be responsible for importing some 90% of all heroin into the UK. The control of these criminal markets is what fuels the conflict. Criminology expert Dr. Mahmut Cengiz believes the killing of Izzet Eren sends a strong message. He says that if you are able to kill a group leader, it means you are the most powerful organization. But that power dynamic is fragile and temporary. Dr. Cengiz predicts a strong response from the Tottenham Turks, who will have to attack the Hackney bombers and their high-level people to show they are still active. And so, the cycle of violence continues. For now, the men behind the Dalston shooting are either convicted or at large. The gunman on the stolen Ducati Monster remains free, and police are offering a reward of up to £15,000 for information. The brutal reality is that this long-running feud has cost countless lives, but perhaps its most tragic victim is the 9-year-old girl who was simply eating ice cream with her family, caught in the crossfire of a war that began with a slap. For over 2 decades, the streets of Scotland have been a silent battleground in one of the UK's most brutal and enduring criminal feuds, the war between the Daniels and the Lyons. This isn't just a rivalry, it's a relentless, bloody saga born of betrayal and fueled by an insatiable thirst for revenge. To understand its depth, we must go back to the very beginning. Our story truly ignites in the early 2000s. The catalyst? A significant theft. Around the summer of 2001, a substantial stash of cocaine, valued at an estimated £20,000, vanished from a safe house in Glasgow's Milton area. This wasn't just any cocaine. It belonged to the Daniels crime family, and it was the Lyons who were believed to have stolen and sold it. This act of blatant disrespect was the spark that lit the fuse. The Daniels' response was swift, though initially unsuccessful. In September 2001, a botched attempt was made on Stephen Lyons outside a pub in Lamb Hill, Glasgow. It was clear the war had begun. The early exchanges saw symbolic acts of defiance, like the torching of the Churnside Center, a community hub linked to the Lions, and the trashing of its minibus. The violence escalated rapidly. In January 2003, Kevin Carroll, a key enforcer for the Daniels, was shot twice in the leg with a sawn-off shotgun right outside his mother's house in Milton. He survived, but it was a clear message. Just 11 days later, in a retaliatory strike, Johnny Lyons, brother of the notorious Eddie Lyons Sr., was shot outside his home. He famously survived, reportedly due to the bullet being stopped by his wallet. The stakes were getting higher. The mid-2000s marked a terrifying escalation in brutality. In April 2006, Kevin Carroll once again played a central role, shooting Eddie Lyons Jr., son of Stephen Lyons, at his home in Cumbernauld. Again, remarkably, Lyons Jr. survived. But Carroll's next move sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld and beyond. In November 2006, in an act of profound disrespect and pure malice, Carroll allegedly used a 4x4 and a tow rope to topple the headstone of Gary Lyons, Eddie Lyons Sr.'s son, who had died of leukemia years earlier. Catter Cemetery. This desecration of a grave was seen as an unprecedented low, confirming that no line would be left uncrossed. Just weeks later, in December 2006, Carroll attempted to murder Eddie Lyons Jr. for a second time, this time in Belshill, Lanarkshire. Lyons Jr. was injured as his car rolled over him, and an associate was also shot, but both survived. The very next day, the feud exploded into outright murder. On December 6, 2006, a blue Mazda pulled up outside Applero Motors in Lambhill, a garage known to be linked to the Lyons. Two masked gunmen emerged and opened fire. The result was devastating. 21-year-old Michael Lyons, nephew of Eddie Lyons Sr., was murdered. Stephen Lyons and associate Robert Pickett were also seriously injured. This brazen daylight execution in public marked a terrifying new chapter. Following the Applero Motors massacre, a chilling ransom note demanding £25,000 for the stolen drugs was sent to David Lyons, further cementing the initial theft as the root cause. Justice, in the eyes of the law, eventually followed for some. In March to May 2008, Daniel associates Raymond Anderson and James McDonald were tried and convicted for the Applero Motors shooting. They received an initial Scottish record sentence of 35 years each, later reduced to 30 years on appeal. The message was clear. This was serious organized crime, and the penalties would be severe. As we moved into the late 2000s and early 2010s, the war continued even as key figures were incarcerated. The year 2010 brought another seismic event. On January 13, 2010, Kevin Gerbil Carroll, the very Daniel enforcer who had been at the heart of so many violent incidents, met his own brutal end. He was shot 13 times and killed in an Asda car park in Robroyston, Glasgow, while locked in the back seat of an Audi A3. The attack, lasting a mere 25 seconds, was a calculated execution. Ross Monaghan was acquitted of his murder in 2012, but William Buff Paterson was later convicted. This marked a significant blow to the Daniel faction. In other news related to the Lyons, in 2010, Paul Lyons, son of David Lyons, was jailed for the road rage killing of van driver Mark Fleeman, a separate incident but one that highlighted the criminal entanglements of the broader families. The mid-2010s showed no sign of the feud abating. In 2014, Ryan Chalmers, a gangster linked to the Daniel family, was shot in the legs in what was widely seen as a revenge attack. The power dynamics were shifting, but the violence persisted. In 2016, Eddie Lyons Jr. and Ross Monaghan found themselves involved in another street attack outside a bar in East Dunbartonshire, though the trial ultimately collapsed when alleged victims claimed no memory of the event, a testament to the fear and intimidation associated with these gangs. A significant moment occurred in 2016 with the death of Jamie Daniel, the very founder of the Daniel Gang, from cancer. His nephew, Stephen Bonzo Daniel, reportedly stepped up to lead the faction, ensuring the continuity of the feud. The violence even spread beyond Glasgow's immediate vicinity. In 2017, Ross Monaghan, who had been acquitted of Kevin Carroll's murder, survived a shooting when he was wounded in the shoulder while dropping off his daughter at a primary school in Glasgow. This close call prompted him to flee to Spain, seeking refuge from the relentless pursuit. Tragically, the reach of this feud extended even to the world of entertainment. In 2019, the murder of train-spotting two-star Bradley Welsh in Edinburgh was tragically linked to this very gangland feud, with hitman Sean Orman later convicted of his murder. Yet how intertwined and far-reaching the tentacles of this conflict had become, and the story, devastatingly, continues into the present. As recent as March 2025, we've seen reports of a sickening spate of alleged gangland violence, including shootings, firebombings, and assaults erupting across Glasgow and Edinburgh, indicating a chilling resurgence of the feud, proving its deeply entrenched nature. Then, a dramatic development on the international stage. Just over a month ago, on May 31st, 2025, the feud reached a brutal crescendo on the sunny shores of the Costa del Sol. Eddie Lyons Jr. and Ross Monaghan, both prominent figures in the Lyons faction, were shot dead by a masked gunman outside Monaghan's bar in Fuengirola, Spain, after watching the UEFA Champions League final. Spanish police swiftly acted, later arresting Michael Riley in Liverpool, stating he is a Daniel clan member and responsible for these double murders. This shocking event underscores the global reach and unrelenting nature of this feud. Beyond the direct violence, the Daniels v. Lyons war has also revealed deeper international criminal connections, with the Lyons notably forging links with the notorious Kinahan organized crime group, a powerful Irish drug cartel. This highlights that these are not just local skirmishes, but parts of a complex and dangerous transnational criminal network. The Daniels v. Lyons gang war is more than just a series of incidents. It's a grim narrative of power, revenge, and a cycle of violence that seems almost impossible to break. It serves as a stark reminder of the devastating human cost of organized crime in Scotland, a conflict that continues to define a dark chapter in the nation's criminal history. Welcome. Tonight, we're diving into a story that reads like something straight out of a Hollywood movie, a high-stakes heist with a modern twist. The target, not a bank, but a luxury watch store inside one of the UK's busiest shopping centres. The prize, £1.4 million in watches. The perpetrator, a seemingly unassuming 56-year-old man from Kent. This is the story of David Buson and the audacious Blue Water Shopping Centre burglary. You see, this wasn't some smash and grab. This was a crime born of meticulous planning and unnerving patience. For weeks, David Buson became a ghost in the machine. Using a Mercedes with cloned number plates, he made no less than 16 trips to the sprawling Blue Water complex, carefully studying its layout and security. His reconnaissance was an operation in itself. During one of these visits, security cameras caught him on foot, but what they didn't see was the miniature camcorder he was carrying. Buson was a man with a plan, and every detail mattered. He wasn't just observing, he was actively collecting intelligence. He waited for a specific window of opportunity, and then he made his move. The night of February 7th, 2025 was when his grand design came to life. Under the cloak of darkness, Buson returned to Blue Water. He didn't come in through the front door. Instead, he used a telescopic ladder to scale the side of the building, gaining access to the roof. From there, he cut a precise hole directly above the targeted store. It's an old-school technique that speaks to a certain kind of skill and determination. But he wasn't done. He then cut a second hole, this time through the roof of the shop unit itself. Once inside, he knew exactly where to go. He made his way to the safe, and using the pin he had captured on his secret recordings, he bypassed the security and got what he came for. 159 luxury watches valued at a jaw-dropping £1.4 million. It was a flawless execution, or so he thought. Buson left the scene and disappeared into the night. He was confident his meticulous planning would pay off, but he had underestimated the other side of the chessboard: modern police work. While his methods were old school, the authorities were anything but. Using a combination of CCTV footage and automatic number plate recognition, or ANPR, police were able to track the cloned Mercedes and a second vehicle he used. They traced his movements and eventually identified him. The trail led them all the way to a small town in Cumbria, where David Buson was arrested just days later. The final piece of the puzzle came from a search of his car and home. It was there that investigators found the very tools of his trade. They discovered a bag containing some of the stolen watches. And perhaps most damning of all, they found the tiny camcorder. When they played the footage, it was all there. The weeks of reconnaissance, the careful study of the store, the surreptitious recording of a staff member entering the safe PIN. It was the perfect piece of evidence, a cinematic climax to a very real crime. David Buisson's elaborate plan, a mixture of patience, skill, and careful surveillance, was ultimately undone by the very technology he tried to exploit. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 6 years and 1 month in prison. His story serves as a reminder that no matter how carefully a plan is laid, there's always a risk that the simplest detail or the quiet eye of a camera will be the thing that brings it all down. The Graff Diamonds robbery took place on the 6th of August 2009 when 2 men posing as customers entered the premises of Graff Diamonds in New Bond Street, London, and stole jewelry worth nearly £40 million, 65 million. It was believed to be the largest ever gems heist in Britain at the time, and the second largest British robbery after the £53 million raid on a Securitas depot in Tunbridge, Kent, in 2006. The robbers' haul totaled 43 items of jewelry, consisting of rings, bracelets, necklaces, and wristwatches. One necklace alone has been reported as being worth more than £3.5 million. Britain's previous largest jewelry robbery also took place at Graff's. In 2003, the robbers used the services of a professional makeup artist to alter their skin tones and their features using latex prosthetics and to be fitted with professional wigs. The artist took 4 hours to apply the disguises, having been told that it was for a music video. Viewing the results in a mirror, Aman Kray commented, "My own mother wouldn't recognize me now," to which his accomplice is reported to have laughed and replied, "That's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?" The same makeup studio had unwittingly helped disguise members of the gang that robbed the Securitas depot in 2006. On the 6th of August 2009 at 4:40 p.m., 2 sharply dressed men arrived at the Graff Diamonds jewelry store in New Bond Street, central London, by taxi, and once inside produced 2 handguns which they used to threaten staff. Study made no attempt to conceal their faces from the premises. CCTV cameras due to their elaborate disguises. Even though one of the robbers was wearing leather gloves, store security allowed him entry, being used to the eccentric behavior of some super-wealthy clients. Petra Einar, a shop assistant, was forced at gunpoint to empty the store's display cabinets. A total of 43 rings, bracelets, necklaces, and watches were taken. She was briefly held hostage at gunpoint and was forced into the street during the getaway. She testified that the robbers told her that she would be killed if she did not carry out their demands. After releasing the hostage outside the store, one of the robbers fired a shot into the air to create confusion, and both escaped the scene in a blue BMW vehicle. This vehicle was abandoned in nearby Dover Street, where a second gunshot was fired into the ground, while the robbers switched to a second vehicle, a silver Mercedes. They again switched vehicles in Farm Street, after which there was no further information regarding their whereabouts. All of the diamonds had been laser inscribed with the Graff logo and a Gemological Institute of America identification number. Detectives investigating the robbery stated, "They knew exactly what they were looking for, and we suspect they already had a market for the jewels." The suspects' details were circulated to all ports and airports, but police believed they would have an elaborately prepared escape route and had already left the country. The robbery was being investigated by Barnes Flying Squad, headed by Detective Chief Inspector Pam Mace. The financial loss to Graff Diamonds was more than £10 million, £6.6 million. The actual value of the pieces for insurance purposes was put at $39 million, £26 million. But, according to Nicholas Payne, the company's secretary, the syndicate that insured Graff was only liable for $28.9 million. A pay-as-you-go mobile phone was discovered that robbers Kray and Craig Calderwood left in the car after ramming into a black cab. After the collision, in their haste to transfer to a second vehicle, The robbers forgot the mobile phone that was wedged between the driver's seat and the handbrake. Anonymous numbers stored on the mobile phone quickly allowed police to discover the identity of the robbers. Prosody rate 7. On the 20th of August 2009, two men, Calderwood, 26, of No Fixed Abode, and Solomon Bain, 24, of Lylestone Road, London NW8, were charged in connection with the robbery. On the 21st of August, a third man, Clinton Mogg, 42, of Westby Road, Bournemouth, Dorset, was also charged, and Calderwood and Bain were remanded in custody by Westminster Magistrates Court. On the 22nd of August, Mogg appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court. All three were remanded in custody to appear at Kingston-upon-Thames Crown Court on the 1st of September. A fourth man, aged 50, was arrested and bailed. By mid-October, 10 male suspects had been arrested in connection with the robbery. Charges brought against the individuals include conspiracy with others to commit robbery, attempted murder, holding someone hostage, possessing firearms, and using a handgun to resist arrest. Kray, who planned and executed the heist, was found guilty of conspiracy to rob, kidnap, and possession of a firearm after a 3-month trial at Woolwich Crown Court. On the 7th of August 2010, he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. 3 other men, Bain, 25, of London, Mogg, 43, of Bournemouth, and Thomas, 46, of Kingston-upon-Thames, were each jailed for 16 years after also being convicted of conspiracy to rob. Calderwood was finally jailed for 21 years. As of March 2011, none of the stolen jewelry has been recovered. Experts believe the jewelry has probably been broken up, so the precious stones could be anonymously resold after being recut. Hello and welcome. Today we're diving into the audacious story of a sophisticated criminal enterprise that terrorized the northwest of England, leaving a trail of destruction and stolen cash in its wake. This is the tale of the Caravan Park Gang. For nearly a year, from early 2018 to February 2019, a highly organized group of 5 men wreaked havoc across 4 counties. Their targets? ATM machines, primarily at co-op stores, and their method? Extremely dangerous and destructive. They would pump gas into the cash machines, then ignite it, causing an explosion to crack open the safes. In total, they netted a staggering £480,500. What made this gang particularly intriguing was their operational base. While perpetrating their meticulously planned heists across Cheshire, Greater Manchester, Yorkshire, and Wales, they would retreat to an unassuming caravan park in Rhyl. This seemingly innocent holiday spot served as their headquarters, a place where they mingled with unsuspecting families, all while plotting their next explosive robbery. They believed this strategy, crossing multiple police force boundaries, would keep them off the radar of Greater Manchester police. The gang's prolific nature, however, also presented opportunities for law enforcement. GMP's serious and organized crime group launched Operation Cass in mid-2018 following a surge in ATM attacks. Detectives tirelessly combed through CCTV footage, analyzed phone data, and mapped out offending patterns. They noticed common threads: the same clothing, the specific roles each member played, and the use of stolen high-powered cars like BMWs and VW Golfs, always on false plates. It became clear there were only 1 or 2 teams operating with this particular expertise. The police narrowed down their suspects to a group based in Stockport, known for their involvement in similar burglaries and robberies. Key players were identified, and intelligence was meticulously gathered. They learned the gang would travel from Manchester to the real caravan, conduct all their preparations, acquiring stolen vehicles and clothing, commit the crime, and then return to Wales, believing they were safe. The relentless pursuit by Operation Cass finally culminated in the early hours of February 15, 2019. At approximately 4 a.m., a stolen VW Golf pulled up outside the post office on Lees Road in Oldham. Inside were Philip Clark, Lewis Merkin, and Ryan Wilson. As one of them approached the ATM and began his attack, armed police, who had been conducting surveillance, swiftly moved in. Within seconds, the men were pinned to the ground. In the car, police found gas canisters and cutting equipment, undeniable proof of their intentions. This was the gang's 15th attempt, and it was the one that brought their reign of terror to an end. Hello and welcome. Today we're stepping back in time to an event that shook Manchester's criminal underworld to its core. An event so shocking it has been seared into the city's memory, and one that remains a grim cautionary tale. We're going back to Sunday, March 12, 2006. The place is the Brass Handles, a flat-roofed pub in the heart of Pendleton, Salford. On the surface, it's just a regular, bustling pub. The air is filled with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the roar of a football match on the TV. It's half-time, and Manchester United is up 2-0 against Newcastle. For many of the regulars packed inside, it's a perfect Sunday afternoon. But for a few, this day will be anything but normal. This day, the shadows of Manchester's gangland will step into the light and leave a trail of death that would ripple through the city for years to come. To understand what happened in the Brass Handles, you have to understand the players and the deep-seated rivalries that had long defined the city's criminal landscape. At the center of this story are three distinct groups. First, the old guard of the Salford underworld, figures like Bobby Spears, a close friend of the man known as Salford's Mr. Big, Paul Massey. Spears, a seasoned veteran of the streets, was a figure of respect and fear. Then there was the Doddington gang from Moss Side. This was a crew known for its ruthlessness, and its founder, Ian MacLeod, was a figure all but retired from the front lines of crime, but still held immense power. And finally, the young men on the rise, a new generation seeking to make their mark. One of these was David Totten, a hardman whose burgeoning reputation was beginning to demand attention and to step on the toes of the established powers. The feud that led to this day was personal. For some reason, David Totten had become a problem for Bobby Spears. The full story has never been made public, but police believe it stemmed from a public humiliation. Months before the shooting, Totten was refused entry to a Manchester nightclub. He tried to get in by name-dropping Spears, who was already inside. The doorman fetched Spears, who feigned ignorance and denied knowing Totten, leaving him to be turned away and embarrassed. It might have seemed like a harmless joke to Spears, a way to put a cocky young man in his place. But in the world of gangland pride, this was a massive insult. Totten's response was a bold, almost provocative one. He started drinking in Spears' local, the Brass Handles. It was a clear message, a move designed to spook his rival. And it worked. Spears became worried. He decided the only way to deal with Totten was to have him killed. Spears hired Ian MacLeod, the Doddington crew leader, for the hit. The price was £10,000. MacLeod, in turn, chose two young men to carry out the assassination. Carlton Alvarenga, 20, and Richard Austin, 19. They weren't seasoned killers. They were, by all accounts, terrified. They weren't doing this for the money. Police later learned they were in debt to MacLeod, and this was their way of paying it off. This was a mission they were forced to take. MacLeod drove them to the pub in his Ford Mondeo. He parked nearby, waiting. His part of the job was done. It was up to the young men to walk into one of Salford's toughest pubs and carry out the hit. Inside the Brass Handles, another key player was in position. Connie Howarth, a convicted gun runner, was at the bar. She was the spotter. Her job was to keep an eye on David Totten and his friends, who were in the pub's snooker room. She was on her mobile phone, ready to send a discreet message to MacLeod with Totten's precise location. A woman known as the Black Widow, she was a veteran of this world, cool and collected. As Alvarenga and Austin were making their way to the pub, she was in the ladies' room, touching up her lipstick. A moment of chilling calm before the storm. At 2:45 p.m., a few minutes into the second half of the United-Newcastle game, a chilling signal went out. Totten was seated at a table, surrounded by his friends. He was right where they wanted him. Alvarenga and Austin were ready. They were armed with handguns, sent into a crowded pub to kill a man they barely knew. As they entered the pub, all eyes were on the football game. But soon, all eyes would be on them. Sound of a pub door swinging open. The noise of the pub stops abruptly, replaced by the sound of gunshots, 6 in total, and screams. The soundscape becomes chaotic and loud. 6 shots. 6 times they fired into David Totten's chest. Another man, Aaron Travers, jumped in front of his friend, taking 2 bullets meant for Totten. Totten incredibly survived, but in the immediate chaos, the plan fell apart. Austin's gun jammed. The men at the table, Totten's friends, didn't run. They reacted. They turned the tables on the hitmen, literally. They upended a table, using it as a shield. And then, a moment that shocked everyone, they disarmed the would-be assassins and in a horrifying twist, shot them with their own guns. Mortally wounded, Alvarenga and Austin staggered out of the pub and onto a grass verge outside. They collapsed and died there. The aftermath was a scene of utter silence. The first police on the scene found 2 bodies a few meters from the pub, but inside there was nothing. The pub was empty. The CCTV system was gone. Not a single person who had been in the pub that day would talk. The Salford Code of Omerta was at work, a wall of silence that seemed impenetrable. It was a nightmare for detectives. With no witnesses and no evidence from the scene, the case seemed destined to remain unsolved. But the police found 2 burner phones on the grass near the bodies, and from that small piece of evidence, they began to unravel the whole story. The phones were the key. One had been topped up with a loyalty card. That card led police to an incriminating web of communications between Spears, McLeod, and Howarth, proving they were the ones who orchestrated the hit. While the 2 young men who died in the street have never had justice for their murders, the masterminds behind the hit were brought to justice. Spears, McLeod, and Howarth were all eventually convicted of conspiracy to murder, thanks to the painstaking work of detectives who refused to be defeated by the code of silence. They were sentenced to life, a testament to the police's determination. The brass handles was eventually demolished, but the story of that day, the terror, the betrayal, and the shocking turn of events remains a defining moment in the history of Manchester's criminal underworld. It's a reminder of the brutal consequences of gangland ambition and a testament to the lives lost in its wake. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment, and share.